Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 1276, Beast Wave. When Han Li departed from the alley, he continued his stroll. Not long after, Han Li eventually discovered his main objective for departing from the Heavenly East Enterprise, a store that specialized in selling records. Han Li walked into it without batting an eye. The bookstore was on the larger side and was abundant with books, covering topics ranging from astronomy to miscellaneous topics. But since it was a bookstore for mortals, it didn't contain any jade slips or records of cultivation. Han Li only had eyes on the records that were useful to him, particularly those covering the customs and circumstances in the spirit realm. It is only with this that he'll be able to take his first step into understanding the spirit realm. He bluntly scooped up several books and picked out a map of the nearby surroundings. As Han Li didn't have any gold or silver on him, he could only pay using a low-grade spirit stone. The store owner was overjoyed by this and hurried back to give him his change in silver. With the books in hand, he sought out a restaurant and sat in an unremarkable corner. After ordering a few common dishes, he began to look through the books. Although Han Li's spiritual sense wasn't able to leave his body, he still possessed his amazing memory. Despite how impressively thick a few of the books were, Han Li calmly flipped through them at astonishing speeds and imprinted each and every word in his mind. During this time, his face remained unfazed, but he continued to turn through the books with an understanding of everything he read. Let alone anything else, merely the detailed descriptions relating to the spirit realm's circumstances left him shocked. The heavenly origin region that the Heavenly East Enterprise mentioned was actually one of the human territories ruled by one of the three human sovereigns, the Heavenly Origin Sage. The other territories that were occupied by humans are the North Sky Hegemon's Black Tortoise Mirror and Emperor Heavenwonder's Heavenly Spirit region. These two sovereigns were respectively known as the Hegemon and Spirit Emperor. The human body refiners originated from the Heavenly Origin Sage, and later founded the Confucian school as well, earning him the name of the Scholar Emperor. He ruled over the Heavenly Origin region and had the social customs that were most similar to Han Li's mortal realm. This was quite fortunate for him. The three human clans occupied a vast region, containing anywhere from several hundred settlements to over 1,000. According to the book, a city of 100 million people was considered a small city in the spirit realm. Other large cities far exceeded the land and scope of a Yuan city. Heavenly Origin City in particular, where the Heavenly Origin Sage resides, was nearly the size of a small country. However, Heavenly Origin City was also the most ordinary of the three human capital cities. The Hegemon's Black Tortoise City was constructed on the back of a tremendous huge tortoise known as Kunling. It was a huge city that could slowly move through the sea. And the Spirit Emperor's Heavenly Spirit City was even more miraculous. It was built on a tree over 50 kilometers wide. It was said to be able to reach the immortal realm. When Han Li read this, he was shocked as one could imagine. But what amazed him even more was what he read next. According to the record's introduction, in addition to the region of the three sovereigns, there were also the neighboring lands of the 7 demon kings. The demon clan and the human clans could be said to have a half-friendly, half-hostile relationship. The reason why this was the case was that the area the 3 human sovereigns and the 7 demon kings ruled over was only a small drop the sea known as the spirit realm. The land outside their domain was ruled by the clans of other creatures. Most of these creatures were indigenous to the spirit realm. There were also countless types ranging from savage ancient beasts to giants and even pseudo-humans. In addition, there were also other creatures that arrived at the spirit realm by ripping open spatial tears. Although there aren't many of these clans, they were a powerful force that was hostile towards humans and demons alike. They also possessed their own unique abilities, allowing them to rival humans and demons in power. In addition to this, there were also many powerful individuals in the spirit realm, as one might expect. There were the mythical beasts of legends, fearsome existences like true dragons that could ignore the laws of the world. Although many vastly powerful characters emerged from the demons and humans, they were only capable of having a standing in the spirit realm. Although humans and demons viewed each other with hostility normally, when they faced an even larger threat, they had no choice but to cooperate. This led to an official founding of the lands they controlled. In the past, many extraordinary individuals emerged from the human and demon clans, joining together to erect an exceedingly large spell formation, covering the territories of the humans and the demons. It is said the spell formation is profoundly powerful and was passed down from the immortal realm. It was said to target extremely powerful members of the foreign creatures. The more powerful they were, the more they were restricted by the formation, rendering them unable to enter the areas affected by the spell formation. However, the formation also wouldn't have any effect on low and mid-grade demon beasts. This immense spell formation had over 10 formation cores spread throughout the regions of humans and demons. The book hadn't mentioned where the formation cores in the demon territories were located, but it did mention how they were located at the 3 human capitals. Unless they were all destroyed, the spell formation protecting the humans would remain. Considering how important the formation cores were, they must surely be placed in important areas of the demon territories as well. If a powerful foreign creature wished to invade the territories of humans and demons, they would have to face the combined power of the 10 powerful formation cores. By relying on this powerful immortal formation, the human and demon clans were able to prosper and hold a place in the spirit realm. As for the other areas in the vast realm, humans had never delved too deeply into the world. There were only descriptions of how there were countless lands and distances. At that point, a trace of doubt appeared in Han Li's mind. Since the region occupied by humans in the spirit realm was so small, then how were cultivators ascending from the lower realms able to accurately land in the region controlled by humans? It would have been incredibly dangerous if he appeared in an area outside the Grand Immortal Formation. Han Li felt puzzled, but the book hadn't mentioned anything else, so he could only set the thought aside for the time being. After going through a few descriptions from the book, Han Li discovered that demons as a whole were more powerful than the human clans, but the humans seemed to possess more powerful cultivators. As a result, the 2 clans formed an odd equilibrium, and the 3 sovereigns and 7 kings agreed to a defensive pact as well as several other treaties. One of these agreements noted that high-grade cultivators couldn't arbitrarily suppress low-grade demon beasts of remote areas and couldn't participate in defending human cities from periodic beast waves. In addition, demons couldn't pillage humans at will, and they needed to establish territories where humans could gather and be protected. When the humans and demons divided their land, the territories of the humans and demons were mixed to a vast degree. Although they chose areas most populated by humans and demons, there were still large numbers of either race that lived in other areas. The high-grade human and demon cultivators naturally had no problem with this and decided to move them. However, demon beasts that have yet to gain sentience and ordinary human mortals weren't able to easily move long distances. They could only continue to live on their original lands and accept the rule of another clan. From the beginning, there would be wanton slaughter of either side, and war was waged several times. After much turmoil, another agreement was eventually passed. Of course, the book in Han Li's possession only detailed the most important points and hadn't mentioned them in detail. As for matters relating to the beast wave, he picked out a book for that in particular. The so-called beast waves would occur when ordinary beasts would reproduce in too great a number. Since high-grade individuals couldn't interfere as a result of previous agreements, every period of a few years, the demons and humans had no choice but to slay one another to protect their own lives. However, if there were human settlements in the region, low-grade demon beasts could lead the beast wave into a human settlement in a half-suicidal charge. As a result, apart from a few large cities in particular, most human cities would periodically encounter a beast wave. Although there weren't many true attacks on human settlements, each beast wave would leave a huge number of casualties in their wake. Because of this, low-grade body refiners and cultivators had their fates tied together. While ordinary mortals would die, it was also a time for cultivators and refiners to break through their bottlenecks and be honed in powerful characters. With both disaster and fortune simultaneously occurring, the high-grade human cultivators tacitly allowed the beast waves to continue and held no intention of altering the agreement with the demon clans. Each beast wave on a city didn't follow a strict schedule, but there were 2 types of beast waves that were most commonly seen. They would be the wolf waves from grasslands and serpent waves from other regions. The 2 types of beasts had powerful reproductive ability and were bound to launch a beast wave every 100 years or so. If a city were to encounter 2 or more types of beasts in a beast wave, it would be considered a grand beast wave with far greater danger. In the past, all the breaches into human cities seem to have occurred with grand beast waves. Therefore, if the city knew a grand beast wave was about to occur, the higher echelon of the city would be struck with fear and do their utmost to gather together the nearby body refiners and low-grade cultivators in preparation for the upcoming battle of survival. When Han Li saw this, he sighed and slowly closed the book. There was without question that the city was going to experience another beast wave. Furthermore, with the grasslands being so close to the city, it will be a wave of wolves. However, the nervousness of the city revealed that this was a grand beast wave. He silently picked up the cup of watered wine before him and he narrowed his eyes in thought. Chapter 1277. Danger of Tribulation. Since he entered the spirit realm, Han Li didn't have much interest in the beast wave, but now that he knew it was related to restoring his magic power and breaking the Ice Phoenix's restriction on his body. And the beast wave was just about to happen. According to the Soaring Sky Beast's incarnation, nascent soul and deity transformation stage cultivators suffer a minor tribulation once every 300 years. Although he no longer had his magic power, the presence of his cultivation still existed. Who knew when tribulation would strike him? If tribulation for a deity transformation stage cultivator truly struck him, he would surely perish with his trifling cultivation at the 4th stage of the Vajra arts and lack of magic treasures. When Han Li thought of this, his expression turned sullen. The best way to settle this matter was to quickly find the Ice Phoenix and mutually remove the restriction from one another. When they encountered mishaps from inside the spatial node, the Ice Phoenix was able to act first in escaping from the spatial node as a result of her innate spatial abilities. She should have already made it somewhere in the spirit realm. Knowing the power of the restriction he placed on her, she should have found herself in a similar situation as himself. In a place as large as the spirit realm, he wouldn't be able to find her in a short amount of time even if he had his magic power. Within 3 human realms and 7 demon lands, there are actually many characters that possess abilities at the level of deity transformation. Now that he didn't have any power to defend himself, it was only wishful thinking to journey off to find her, so he would have to come up with other ways to restore his magic power and save himself. As a current, he couldn't absorb even a thread of his spiritual power and there wasn't a single secret technique he could use. Cultivating magic power once more would be an impossible task. Seeking out the aid of other high-grade cultivators would also be out of the question. As he possessed many secrets, it would only be courting death. As Han Li sat in his chair, his expression wavered. His gaze shifted and he muttered with a gloomy expression, "It seems my only choice is to tread the original path." In the coming month in a Yuan city, Han Li thought long and hard about how to restore his original abilities. He managed to think of a feasible method in half a month, but it wasn't good by any means and it would take some time. And with his unfamiliarity with the spirit realm, he hesitated to use this method. But now that he was coming to terms about understanding the spirit realm, it appeared he had no choice but to use this method upon some further deliberation. He would have to cultivate the only technique he could cultivate, the Vajra arts, to grand completion. According to what records said about the technique, when one cultivated the technique to the 7th layer, one's flesh body was overbearing enough to compare with a nascent soul cultivator. In that case, he would be able to use the sheer power of his body to dispel the Ice Phoenix's restriction. When that point comes, it should be a simple matter to cultivate magic power and condense a nascent soul. Although it is said that condensing a nascent soul regularly takes 100 years, with his magic power restored, he could return to the storage pouches he buried in the desert. With the aid of the many spirit medicines it contains, the process will be sped up several times. In one word, the first step to returning his abilities would be to dispel the restriction placed on his body and then condense his nascent soul. He reckoned that if a minor tribulation were to strike him, it should be in 300 years. But that was only a guess. If he wished to preserve his life, he would have to cultivate the Vajra arts as quickly as he could. The Soaring Sky Beast had previously told him just how difficult it was to cultivate the Vajra arts. Even in the spirit realm where the spiritual chi was incredibly dense, there were very few mortals that could cultivate the Vajra arts to completion. Even if a normal person possessed exceptional talents, they still wouldn't dare to be confident. But Han Li was by no means a normal person. Not only did he cultivate from being a mortal to a deity transformation cultivator, causing his unwavering determination to far exceed those of a common cultivator in the spirit realm, but he also consumed the heavenly corpse pearl, the dragon scale fruit, and many other spiritual medicines. His body was already far stronger than normal. Particularly because of the dragon scale fruit and the bone tempering arts, his body was already on par with that of an ordinary demon beast. When he arrived in the spirit realm, the massive amount of magic power from dissipating his too nascent soul not only saved his life, but they also increased his body's capacity by another level. With all of these things together, it was no wonder Han Li felt confident. As of current, the only thing for him to consider was the inhuman pain he would suffer while cultivating this technique and the amount of time for him to take. Because there were so many low and mid-grade demon beasts roaming around areas far from the city, it would be unwise to cultivate alone. Furthermore, cultivating the last several layers of the Vajra arts would need battle experience for him to increase his odds of making a breakthrough. In that case, there was no harm in remaining with the Heavenly East Enterprise for a time. If he truly felt they were an inconvenience, he would simply leave. As for the blood curse contract that was placed on his body, the blood curse would be cleanly refined by his body from its sheer vital essence. Having come to a decision, Han Li was done for the time being. He took his books and left the restaurant. Then, he found a secluded area and crushed his books with his arms. Under the huge force, they turned into a cloud of paper shreds that floated to the ground. Next, he went around the city to find a blacksmith store. He examined the shop and handed the tendon over to a blacksmith. Afterwards, he pointed to a few other materials in the shop, uttered a few soft instructions, and gave the blacksmith 2 low-grade spirit stones. When the ironworker heard Han Li, he was stunned, but he soon took the 2 spirit stones and nodded with a smile. Han Li left with a smile and flagged down a carriage being pulled by a horse-deer creature of sorts. He didn't care about the animal's origins or whatnot. He simply tossed the driver a silver piece and muttered the words, "The cloud ease in." Then, he entered the carriage and took a brief moment of rest. Beast carriages were being driven by docile animals throughout the city. After all, in a city of this scope, it would be odd to not have any carriages to speak of, as if it would take hours to walk from one district of a city to another. The carriage he was riding was rather beautiful. It was clear the carriage was used to transport those of wealthier families rather than commoners. Han Li's action angered the carriage driver at first, but when he saw the silver piece, he hesitantly drove off to the eastern part of the city. Han Li slept for a short while before he heard the carriage driver say, "Sir, we've arrived at the inn." Han Li slowly opened his eyes and wordlessly walked out of the carriage. He saw a large expanse of pavilions and courtyards with a particularly large building right in front of him. It hung a huge sign that wrote the words "Cloud Ease in golden letters. To the sides of the building, there was a row of huge stables constructed from wood, housing all sorts of strange beasts and their carriages. Strange animal cries would occasionally sound from them. Han Li swept his sights past them and quickly arrived in front of the large building gate. He called out to a group of waiting young servants, waved towards one of them. The servant quickly reacted and immediately ran over. "Esteemed guest, did you call me out to board here? The Heavenly East Enterprise should have checked in here. Do you know where they are?" Han Li calmly asked, tossing him a piece of silver. When the servant took the silver, he grinned and said, "He, so you're looking for those of the esteemed Heavenly East Enterprise. I will guide you." Soon, he brought Han Li through the back of the building and passed through several courtyards. The servant led the way and enthusiastically explained, "There are many esteemed guests from the Heavenly East Enterprise, so they filled up all of the west courtyards where we have the inn's finest rooms." Han Li listened to the servant's words with complete indifference. But before they reached the courtyard, a youth walked past them and saw Han Li. He yelped and approached them with a wide smile. "Brother Han, you've returned. Very good. Brother Zhong has told us to bring you over to the mistress as soon as we saw you. Please follow me." He then casually grabbed Han Li's arm. Han Li raised his brow and casually shook his shoulder, strangely shaking off the man's grasp. The youth was stunned when he saw this. Han Li smiled and calmly asked, "So it was Brother Luo. Is this mistress you were talking about, Mistress Fang?" The youth was a cavalryman of the Heavenly East enterprise known as Young Seventh. The odd look on the youth's face disappeared and he answered with a smile, "Of course I was talking about Mistress Fang. She heard about you and is quite curious about you. She wants to see you." Han Li said with a casual tone, "As a member of the organization, I will follow her orders. I will have to trouble you to show me the way." Of course, of course. From how his grip was shaken off, he realized Han Li possessed abilities far beyond his. As he didn't dare to do something else that was disrespectful, he obliged with a smile. Han Li eventually sent away the servant and followed the youth surnamed Luo to the east courtyard. On the way, they saw many guards and cavalrymen and greeted them. After making several turns and passing through a dozen large courtyards, they finally arrived at a small isolated courtyard. It was rather elegant and peaceful nearby. There were two large unfamiliar guards standing guard at the gate without weapons. When Han Li walked over to the two large men swept an icy gaze past him. Chapter 1278, The Gold Jade School. Han Li looked at the two with narrow eyes. The two clearly weren't ordinary body refiners as demonstrated from the chilling pressure of their gaze. He did sense the two appeared to be stronger than Zhong Kuei. "Elder brothers, I am Brother Han, who recently joined the Enterprise. The mistress mentioned she wished to see me." The shorter of the two glanced at Han Li and said, "Ah, you are the person who cultivated the Vajra arts to the 3rd stage. You do appear young, but is that from taking a medicine pill to maintain your appearance?" The words contained were actually rather rude. If you too feel that way, then consider it to be true. Han Li's heart jumped, but he maintained a smile on his face. The larger of the two then snorted and harshly said, "I don't believe you truly cultivated the Vajra arts to the 3rd layer. I'll be testing you, don't take offense." With a cold glint shining from his eye, he grabbed Han Li's wrist. Han Li raised his brow but didn't avoid the large man's hand. When the man touched his wrist, he sensed the man's fingers turn exceptionally cold and release a huge force squeezing his wrist. Han Li wore neither a scowl or a smile, but his eyes turned sullen. Under the man's force, Han Li's wrist glowed with a layer of faint golden light, but it soon disappeared. Soon, Han Li remained still and allowed the man to do as he wished. A short moment later, the large man exerted a large portion of his strength, but Han Li still remained nonchalant. Eventually, the man's face revealed surprise, and he hesitated for a moment. But rather than letting go, he took a deep breath and shined black light from his fingers, exerting even more strength on Han Li's wrist. The smile Han Li wore on his face finally vanished and he snorted, giving a casual shake of his twist. The large man suddenly felt a vibration run through his fingers as his body became numb. Then with a frightened cry, he felt a huge force travel through him as he flew into the air. As Han Li wore an emotionless expression, the large man was flung into a stone wall nearby. Just as the man was about to have a messy impact, the other guard suddenly pounced 10 meters to quickly catch him. But just as the shorter guard caught his companion in midair, his expression vastly changed and he reached out to grab him with his other hand. A large thump sounded, followed by 2 softer thuds. Although the shorter guard was able to catch him, he staggered back 8 steps and his complexion was pale. Han Li narrowed his eyes and glanced at the shorter guard. Even against the huge force Han Li released, the shorter guard was still able to catch his companion. The shorter guard's body refinement technique must be the greater of the two. The youth surnamed Luo was left stunned. The 2 men at the gate were Mistress Fang's personal bodyguards. Although they normally didn't mingle with the cavalrymen, they possessed brilliant body refinement techniques to the point where Captain Zhong Kuei held them in secret admiration. When the confident cavalrymen thought to test their skill against them, they all suffered a miserable defeat. As for Han Li, who recently joined them, he was able to turn them pale with a flick of his wrist. They weren't able to resist in the slightest. Was the 3rd layer of the Vajra arts alone able to produce this much strength? Youth Luo's expression wavered at the slightest. He couldn't have known that most of Han Li's strength actually stemmed from the many dragon scale fruits he consumed over hundreds of years and bone tempering art. Otherwise, even as powerful as the third layer of the Vajra arts may be, he would only be able to produce enough strength to rival the two men. Besides, in truth, Han Li cultivated the Vajra arts to the fourth layer. The shorter guard circulated his inner body technique several times before eventually swallowing his frustration. With a calmed expression, he said, "Brother Han possesses exceptional abilities. We concede defeat. Please head in." He couldn't help but look at Han Li with a trace of respect. As for the taller guard that Han Li tossed, his expression turned unsightly. Han Li smiled and gave them a short salute before casually strolling in. Youth Luo naturally didn't have the qualifications to follow him and could only wait outside. When Han Li saw that the main gate to the courtyard building was shut and thought to knock on it, he heard a woman's sweet voice sound from within. "Xianxia Han, please come in. I've been waiting on you for quite a while." Han Li blinked twice and calmly walked in, not feeling particularly surprised. When he went in, his expression stirred. He was surprised to see several people in the room. In the master's seat across from the door sat an azure-robed woman in her 30s. Her skin was fair and her beauty was still present. Behind her stood a blue-robed man that was in his mid-20s. He bore a strong resemblance to the woman. Sitting across from the woman was an embroidered-robed man with a young face and grey hair. He wore an indifferent expression. Sitting at his side was a handsome young man and a beautiful young woman. They seemed to know what happened outside the courtyard gate and looked in Han Li's direction when he entered. The azure-robed woman had a trace of delight on her face and the blue-robed youth appeared curious. As for the embroidered-robed man, he was wearing a frown and the young pair simply looked surprised. The azure-robed woman stood up and curtsied him. "Xianxia Han, I hope you don't take offense. My bodyguards tested you on my orders. I simply wish to know if the third layer of the Vajra arts was as fearsome as the rumors said. The technique is widely spread, but it is one of the most difficult body refining techniques to cultivate. Very few people break through to the second layer, let alone the third like you." Han Li casually asked with a smile, "I am already a member of your enterprise. I can't take offense over a trifling test. Are you pleased by my performance?" Although he planned on concealing himself in the Heavenly East Enterprise as an insignificant character, he didn't mind revealing a portion of his true strength. As of current, Mistress Fang was looking at him in a favorable light. When she heard Han Li's reply, she sweetly smiled and said, "The third layer of the Vajra arts far exceeded my expectations. You've opened my eyes. Ah yes, I should give Xianxia Han an introduction. This is my son, Pan Qing. He is cultivating immortal techniques under the Golden Jade sect. These three are immortal masters, fellow sect members of my son." So they were immortal masters. Han Li saluted them. Although his spiritual sense couldn't leave his body, it was still quite sharp and sensed their cultivation at this distance. They were all at foundation establishment stage and above. However, the youth and the other young pair appeared to have achieved foundation establishment recently as their spiritual qi was still quite weak. As for the embroidered-robed man, his magic power was quite dense, so he should be at false core stage, the peak of foundation establishment. With the abilities Han Li showed previously, they didn't dare to treat him light and returned the greeting. The embroidered-robed man even smiled and said, "Although I haven't cultivated body refinement techniques before, my master fought against a high-grade body refiner in the past. It is rumored that person was able to slay several grade 6 and 7 demon beasts by himself. I originally believed them to be fanciful tales, but from what Brother Han displayed, I am convinced they are true. But from the force Han Li displayed, it shouldn't only be a result of the Vajra arts but his nature or divine power as well." This person was quite experienced to see some oddities from Han Li's immense strength. Of course, Han Li wasn't about to reveal the dragon scale fruit and all else. He gave a simple explanation, "Brother Qin is quite sharp. Some of my power comes from an innate nature." The embroidered man nodded, feeling that most of his suspicions had disappeared. Following that, the embroidered man said nothing else. Rather, Mistress Fang had a friendly chat with Han Li, but when she asked about his origins, Han Li gave a vague answer. Mistress Fang didn't pursue the matter when she saw this and instead informed him that Pan Qing and the others were to assist an Yuan city with the beast wave on orders from their master. The upper echelons of an Yuan city had ties to the Gold Jade sect. The sect would send out low-grade cultivators to use the beast wave as an opportunity to make breakthroughs. The Foundation establishment cultivators were likely sent for this reason as well. Of course, the Gold Jade sect wasn't the only sect that sent disciples over to the city. There were at least a dozen more. When the men of the Heavenly East Enterprise entered Yuan City, they were also conscripted to fight against the beast wave as per law. As such, Mistress Fang had Han Li act as Zhong Kuei's second in directing the guards. When Han Li heard her, he nodded in agreement after brief consideration. When Mistress Fang saw this, she wore a satisfied expression and had Han Li depart. According to what she said, the beast wave could start at any time. Furthermore, it would be a grand beast wave consisting of several types. It would be best for Han Li to rest and hone his spirit. Han Li smiled and promptly left the room. When the door was shut, Mistress Fang's smile vanished and was replaced with hesitation. The embroidered-robed man stroked his chin and asked, "What? Does Mistress Fang feel this person is a rare find and has changed her mind?" Mistress Fang frowned and openly expressed her thoughts. "That is so. This person is young, yet holds his current cultivation. If he were nurtured, I suspect that he will become an existence on the level of old fire. Otherwise, I would have gone with the original plan and have Zhong Kuei or the Liu brothers follow you on your journey after the beast wave." Chapter 1279, Azure Wolf, Crimson Python, Leocon Beast. The embroidered-robed man shook his head. "I've already seen Captain Zhong and the Mistress Liu brothers. If Brother Han wasn't here, we would use either of them, but now that we have a more suitable candidate, we will have to make the more reliable choice. After all, he completed the third layer of the Vajra arts. He has nothing to fear from the attack of low-grade spirit tools, and his immense strength will make him even more suitable for the journey. If we were to take someone else, the odds of defeat will be greater. If we startle those demon beast guards, we won't get a second chance. Mistress, could it be you don't wish for Junior Marshal Brother Pan to achieve core formation?" Mistress Fang sighed and she said with a tone of helplessness, "Senior Marshal Brother Qin's words are reasonable. Even if this person has as much potential as Old Fire, I feel like China's core formation will possess far more potential." The embroidered-robed man felt relief and he smiled. "Lady Fu is quite a sensible person. The breakout of this beast wave turned into an exceptional opportunity. It appears those demon beast guards aren't involving themselves. When the time comes, we might be able to escape from them. That's why although we need a body refiner, he won't necessarily be needed. So long as the matter succeeds, I won't treat him unfairly and make sure he doesn't harbor a grudge against you. Immortal Qin's magic power is quite strong. After you acquire it, there should be no problem in core formation. In the future, I hope you'll look after my son." When that was said, she smiled and didn't directly address him. The man glanced at the blue-robed youth and warmly said, "He, Junior Marshal Brother Pan's aptitude is no less than mine. If I can achieve core formation, Junior Marshal Brother should have no problem with the item in hand. The mistress should feel at ease." Pan Qing saluted his senior martial brother with a deep expression and uttered words of thanks. As for the pair sitting next to the embroidered-robed man, they glanced at one another with a knowing smile. During this time, the atmosphere in the hall became rather friendly. Han Li couldn't have known that his first contact with humans in the spirit realm already involved him in a scheme. It was unknown if he was cursed by the heavens or just had bad luck. In case he knew about this matter, he would have simply found himself not knowing whether to laugh or cry. A few trifling mortals and Foundation establishment cultivators thought of using him, a deity transformation cultivator. They were beyond reckless. Even without his magic power, he had methods of easily killing them. But as he was kept in the dark and intended on remaining with the Heavenly East Enterprise, he left the courtyard and went to see the large scarred man. Not long after, Han Li was appointed a high second in command, but there were others that weren't convinced. But when Han Li revealed a portion of his immense strength, he alarmed them and kept them quiet. Because Han Li was given his own room, he didn't have to mingle with the others. In the following days, he began to grasp the chant for the fifth layer of the Vajra arts. According to the bright jade arts, it would be much smoother if he could cultivate using the magic power present in his body. But now, he would have to cultivate the Vajra arts by infusing spiritual qi into his body. He had no choice but to familiarize himself with this strange method before starting his cultivation. 3 days later, Han Li left the inn and disappeared half a day. Apart from those with a discerning eye, most people hadn't noticed that Han Li was gone. But on the 7th day, Han Li was sitting cross-legged on his bed when he suddenly heard huge bell clangs from outside the room. The sound loudly droned and faintly shook the inn. Han Li opened his eyes in shock. The rumbling clangs repeated without end and was soon followed by resounding horns, crying out to the city one after another. Han Li frowned and wordlessly walked out. The west courtyard was already scrambling into action. The guards and cavalrymen were walking out from their rooms with weapons and armor in hand. Their expressions ranged anywhere from excitement to fear and worry. As panicked voices sounded through the courtyard, Zhong Kuei walked through with an icy expression and loudly rebuked, "What is there to panic about? It is only a beast wave. It hasn't reached us yet. Return to your rooms and properly rest yourselves. When the time comes, rest will only be a delusionary thought." When the soldiers heard the large man, they all calmed down and obediently returned to their rooms. Han Li saw this with a smile. As Zhong Kuei held his position as the guard commander for over 10 years, his reputation was as high as one would expect. Zhong Kuei glanced over at Han Li and said, "Junior brother Han, follow me to observe and size and scope of the beast wave. Let's see how it compares to what we expected." Han Li quickly replied, "Brother Zhong, I am ready to follow." In truth, although he didn't take this beast wave to heart, he was indeed a bit curious. He wasn't about to refuse an opportunity to broaden his horizons. When the two walked onto the street outside the inn, he discovered there was something amiss. The bustling streets no sparsely had anyone. There were only a few wanderers and their movements were all flustered. There were several beast carriages on the street, but they were in a mad rush. There were also horned wolves, the same that the Heavenly East Enterprise cavalrymen rode. However, the ones who rode them this time were wearing the armor of city guards. They were rushing through the city, loudly declaring martial law on the city as a result of the upcoming beast wave. They were not only drafting body refiners and soldiers, but common mortals were to stay put in their residences. If they were outside and hindered the efforts of resisting the beast wave, they would be immediately executed. When Han Li and Zhong Kuei rode 2 horned wolves to the nearest wall, there was a large purple-robed man standing at the top of the southmost tower in the city. He looked outside the window with one hand pressed against it and the hand held behind his back. He silently looked in the distance with a sullen expression. Suddenly, the door to his room opened and a soldier covered in azure bone armor quickly entered. He kneeled behind the azure-robed man and softly reported, "City Lord, we verified that the beasts gathered in 3 waves. The Jade Grasslands Azure Wolves, the Black Tomb Mountains Crimson Pythons, and the Leocon Beastess." The large purple-robed man sighed and he worriedly said, "So it is an attack by 3 beast types. Very troublesome. If they were other beasts, it would have been fine, but Azure Wolves and Crimson Pythons only join beast waves every 300 years. Not to mention these astonishing numbers, the Leocon Beastess will make things more troublesome as well. They will attack the weakest point of our city. Although we already prepared bows and crossbows, they fly too quickly so common arrows won't be effective. Didn't you place an order from the Heavenly East Enterprise for exploding crystal arrows, sir? We should be able to hold our own against them. Besides, we have cultivators assisting us. They will be a powerful force to defend the skies. With their assistance, the hawks shouldn't be a problem." The armored soldier consoled. The purple-robed man commanded, "We can only hope to rely on them. Arrange the cultivators together and have them keep watch on the hawks' actions. We will have the soldiers and body refiners join forces in dealing with the wolves and pythons. Ah yes, quickly bring our forces to the ready. Have our guards take turns standing guard." "Yes, sir." An armored soldier yelled and went off to execute his order. The large purple-robed man was the Yuan city lord. He looked out his window with a heavy expression. Han Li stood on top of a segment of the city wall and looked at the distance. Although he appeared calm, his heart was shaken. He saw yellow earth tens of kilometers from the city turn azure. An azure sea spanned as far as he could see. Upon closer inspection, he could make out the silhouette of wolves within them. Their eyes were green and their bodies were azure. Their bared fangs created a savage appearance. The number of wolves were too many to count. They could no longer determine how many hundreds of thousands there were. Apart from the wolf howls, there were the sounds of other beasts mixed in. They sounded in some sort of pattern, as if they were communicating with one another. Zhong Kuei's face turned somewhat pale, but he gripped his hands in a fist and muttered, "Fortunately, the most common beast are the azure wolves. If we encountered red, yellow, or even the rare silver wolf, I fear that an Yuan city wouldn't be able to survive the beast wave." Silver wolves. When Han Li heard this, something suddenly came to mind. In his surprise, the scarred man explained, "What? Has Brother Han never seen silver wolves before? They are several times harder to handle than other wolves. A common silver wolf is a match for a dozen azure wolves. In the last beast wave, I was lucky enough to see several of them. Their fearsomness is fresh in my memory." Chapter 1280, Savage Beast Torrent, 1. Han Li felt his heart roil. When he heard him mention silver wolves, he was instantly reminded of Silver Moon. She was a giant silver wolf that hailed from the Silver Moon wolf clan. Perhaps the silver wolves were of the same clan. But regardless of whether this was true, it was no use to him in his current realm. He could only set aside the thought in the back of his mind. Zhong Kuei solemnly said, "If it were only common wolves, we wouldn't have anything to fear with our high walls, but unfortunately, they are being led by intelligent low-grade demon beasts. They are also mixed with variant beasts that are halfway to becoming a demon beast. While the variant beasts don't possess the same inconceivable abilities as demon beasts, they are still far more fearsome than any ordinary beast. The size, power, and vicious far exceed their ordinary kind. At the very least, an ordinary low-grade body refiner wouldn't be able to take one alone. How troublesome. Are there many of these variant beasts in the wave?" Zhong Kuei pondered briefly and doubtfully said, "There is about one variant beast in 1,000. 1,000? Han Li swept his eyes past the azure beast sea and couldn't help but wryly laugh. Even if he couldn't guess their number, they numbered in the millions at the very least. There should be several thousand variant beasts among them. And with no core formation cultivators guarding the city, those numbers could prove fatal. After taking another look, Zhong Kuei sighed, clearly discouraged by the sight, and said, "All right, let's go to other areas and take a look at the other beasts." Although Han Li followed the large man through the city, he still wore a smile and asked, "What, Brother Zhong worries the city defenses won't hold?" Zhong Kuei replied with an anxious expression, "I am worried, yes. I've seen several beast waves in the past, but never against a city that was just established in the last 1,000 years. Against a grand beast wave like this one and with our lacking preparations, they should be able to breach our defenses. Furthermore, this beast wave also has Leocon beasts. Although there won't be too many of them, they will all be grade 1 demon beasts. As we won't be able to protect against them, they will be a large threat to the city. Are Leocon beasts so fearsome?" A glint flashed in Han Li's eyes and his voice carried doubt. Leocon beasts aren't considered strong amongst the rank of demon birds, but they carry a formidable toxin that can kill ordinary people. Unless they approach us, we will only be able to attack them from afar. And even worse is how nimble and quick these birds are. While they may be lacking in strength, they are unable to suppress them as they attack the weakest points in the city's defense. With a tone of surprise, Han Li asked, "How did this lack of aerial power come to be? Could it be the Yuan city lord didn't know this matter would be so critical? From what he came to know, all positions of secular power within the city belong to mortals. Even if he knew about it, what could he do? I heard the last beast wave to attack the city left disastrous damage. Their numbers were almost exhausted. Being able to restore their defensive strength to this level had already exhausted the city lord's influence. The other nearby cities also lent them a few weapons and soldiers. There is nothing else he can do about the air. When Han Li heard this, he was at a loss for words. Not long after, Han Li followed Zhong Kuei to another side of the city wall and saw rows of meter-long pythons forming a red beast sea. It appeared even more fearsome than the sea of wolves. The only good news to hear from this was that these snakes weren't venomous. As such, their defenses were more lax towards them. As Han Li gazed at the sea of pythons from a distance, he would occasionally spot pythons that were several times larger than the others, and he inwardly gasped. These variant pythons were over 30 meters long, no smaller than a crimson WM. They could easily devour a man. And because the horde of crimson pythons was larger than the azure wolves, it was only natural there would be more of variants. After looking at these two beast hordes, Han Li felt some regret at not being able to see the Leocon beastess. According to what the Zhong Kuei said, the hawks were perched at a concealed area. They wouldn't show themselves until it was time to attack. As Han Li looked at the distant pythons, he suddenly asked, "Why haven't the beast hordes launched their attacks?" The beast hordes are led by intelligent demon beasts. They won't attack us of their own accord. They will be certain to cooperate with the other two demon hordes in a joint assault and strain our forces. Normally, something like this will only occur for another day. Let's go. We need to lead the Heavenly East Enterprise soldiers to the center of the city in preparation for orders. If we are lucky enough to make a breakthrough or comprehend something, it may be worth it to put ourselves in danger. Zhong Kuei let out a cold laugh and led Han Li back to the inn. As expected, the guards at the inn had received orders from a Yuan city and were preparing to move out. They were already gathered together. The Gold Jade sect cultivators were asked for their presence earlier and had already left. Without any hesitation, Zhong Kuei immediately shouted and commanded the 200 soldiers of the Heavenly East Enterprise to move out, marching out of the inn in a powerful display. When they arrived on the street, they saw private troops and body refiners head in the direction of the palace, but most of these groups were nowhere as large or formidable as the Heavenly East Enterprise. Their numbers ranged anywhere from 5 or 6 to a dozen. As Han Li traveled together with the others, they caught quite a bit of attention, particularly with the 50 mounted horned wolves. After all, the horned wolves were one of the many beasts that were tamed by the humans of the spirit realm. Each one was meticulously raised from birth, completely erasing their savage nature. As they were able to exhibit greater power when joined together with cavalrymen, their price was considerably high. Only a business as overbearing at the Heavenly East Enterprise had the ability to purchase so many trained horned wolves for their guards. All the people on the streets were heading in the direction of a huge plaza near a city wall. The city was facing the horde of azure wolves. Tens of thousands of empty-handed strong men, a few uniformed troops, and scattered body refiners were already gathered together. There were even a few mounted horned wolves there, but their numbers didn't match the cavalrymen of the Heavenly East Enterprise. Surrounding the plaza were a few fully armed and Yuan city guards keeping order. A silver-armored middle-aged man stood at the other end of the plaza. He was speaking with a Confucian scholar and a Buddhist monk at his side. When Han Li saw this person, he recognized him as the officer he had seen watching the gate. The scholar and the monk were the two cultivators that inspected their troops. The silver-armored middle-aged man had some sort of skill to keep behind the two cultivators. At that moment, the silver-armored man noticed that enough people had gathered together and he waved his arm. The soldiers behind him roared, utter a string of orders that were already prepared. The first order was to organize a division of cavalrymen. Afterwards, a group of land tortoise carriages rushed into the plaza, carrying a large quantity of weapons and some armor. They began to distribute them to the strong men. As for the body refiners, they didn't hold common weapons in their eye and they stood in place with a detached gaze. For the time being, private troops such as Han Li and the lone body refiners remained to the side. Then, the private troops and body refiners were bewildered by the long wolf cries outside the city. They were resounding and harsh as if brimming with violent energy. Han Li narrowed his eyes when he heard this. The myriad of wolf howls soared through the heavens like rumbling thunder. The body refiners were better off with only changes in expression, but the commoners felt overwhelmed as the scream filled the world. But that was only the start. They soon heard hissing and strange bird cries from other directions. Although these sounds weren't as overwhelming as the wolf howls, they still sent shivers down people's spines. At that moment, gongs sounded from all the city walls at nearly the same time. A man's voice then filled the air. It wasn't particularly loud, but it reached the ears of everyone in the plaza. "Be careful, the beasts have begun to move." It was a sound transmission that came from a grey-robed Foundation establishment cultivator riding on a flying sword. There appeared to be other flying cultivators giving warnings throughout different districts of the city. Suddenly, an uproar rose through a Yuan city and squads of idle soldiers sprung into action. They immediately scaled the walls, manned the ballistas, and readied themselves for battle.